Excellent. Thank you very, very much for joining us, guys. For those who are just a little later into the event to meet us, this is all about getting to understand cybersecurity, finding out how to get into the industry, the things that people have done, the things that people look out for, what sort of goes on. As I said, if you do have any questions that you would like Laura, James, Elliot, or Alex to answer, please pop them in the Q&A on this channel, and I'll try and pick them up as we go through. But what we're going to do is going to first of all move on. Alex, could you give a very short intro to who you are and what you do, please?
Sure. My name's Alex Postprichard. I work for JISC as a penetration tester. I've been doing it on and off for about a year, but for full time about 6 to 7 months in total. And I work with Elliot.
Excellent. Elliot, yourself as well, if there's anything more you'd like to add?
Yeah, hi, I'm Elliot. I work alongside Alex on the pen testing team here at JISC. I also do Cyber Essentials and Cyber Essentials Plus assessments. I've been pen testing in total now for about 3-4 years, I think. Joined cybersecurity about 6 years ago.
Excellent. Just quickly, Alex, I think you left out a little fun bit there. Didn't you swap to the dark side? Didn't you also used to be part of the cyber defense team?
No, I haven't done cyber defense team.
Oh, I thought it was one of you. That's my mistake. Not to worry. James, could we have a small intro from yourself, please?
Yeah, I'm the head of information security at JISC, so I'm responsible for looking after all of JISC's information security needs. I've done that for about 6 years, and for the 10 years prior to that, I worked in JISC's incident response team, so helping our customers with their security incidents.
Fantastic, thank you. And finally, Laura, you have a slightly different role to the other guys, but I still think it's really interesting for the guys to hear about it. So a small intro from yourself, if you would, please.
So I'm Laura, and I work in the information security team with James. And in my role, I tend to focus on more of the internal awareness and comms, so not as much technical. I've been with JISC for about 1.5 years now, and this is my first role in information security, cybersecurity role.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that. That's kind of cool. So we've got some different people with very, very varied roles. Just going to start with some very straightforward questions. I know how you guys got into sort of cybersecurity and stuff like that. Alex and Elliot, if we could start with you guys, because that seems to be the sexy side of the topic. Seeing as it is all about penetration testing and cyber attack. But just for a bit of reality to it, what would you say an average day or a normal day looks like for you guys, please?
Sure. So obviously, Elliot does a few extra things than what I do in the lines of CE and CE+, but a standard day for us would be assuming that we have a job on the go at the time, and depending how far through that job would be, it could be a range of anything from sorting out admin or speaking with a customer, making sure that all the connections are set up for us to perform our test, to doing an external penetration test, perhaps attacking web applications or external infrastructure. On some other days, it could be testing an internal network, examining shares, doing some sort of manipulation through the network and pivoting that way. Or we could be doing a phishing attempt and phishing people on another day. It's an extremely varied and fun job. My favorite one is being on site with a customer and actually being hired to physically break into their site, which is another interesting day.
Okay, so just quickly picking up a couple on those things. You mentioned, first of all, phishing. For anyone who isn't aware, how would you describe what phishing actually is?
So phishing is, well, it can be done in several different ways, but a standard attempt that we'll do is sending out an email to a group of people or targeted people, which is spear phishing. And we send out this email to try and trick people into opening a link or going to a web page And then we can try and do it a little bit further and try and get people to submit their credentials on a fake web page that we've created, all through tricking them through the social aspect of sending them an email and piquing someone's interest in whatever it is that we've put on said email.
Okay, it sounds like a lot of people wouldn't fall for that, but this is why we have people like Laura and James here. Guys, obviously looking from a company point of view, this is something that you guys have to combat against. So what sort of level of threat to a business do you think, well, do you see this actually creating? Either Laura or James answering that one.
Happy to make an attempt on that one.
Please do.
Phishing is probably the largest threat that we have to deal with. Maybe not in terms of severity, the impact of it is often relatively small, but almost all the significant intrusions that we see into our networks and systems begin with some sort of phishing email. So we probably spend a large part of our day monitoring for sort of emails and reports from colleagues who say they've responded to, or say they've received phishing emails, working out how we respond to that. So deleting those emails, blocking them, helping to, and Laura will help and sort of update our guidance and training to make sure that people aren't falling for these types of attacks. So there's sort of like a layered defense that goes on there, sort of between the technology that we have in place as well as the work that Laura does to educate people as to how to be careful when they receive phishing emails.
So it's fair to say then that no one or no company is actually safe from this at all, is it?
Yeah, I would be really surprised if there was a company that said that they were so confident that they would never get phished, that they don't do anything about it. So one of the main things that we've done is make sure that all our accounts are protected with multi-factor authentication. So that seems to be the main way to defeat the majority of phishing attacks, particularly those that are asking for trying to extract usernames and passwords out of our colleagues. So having MFA in place basically means that if the user our colleague hands over their password, then they're not going to have the second factor or token from their phone to be able to authenticate the systems. Then there are other types of phishing as well that we see that can bypass that. So we have phishing emails that try and target our colleagues in finance that are attempting to update banking details and things for our suppliers to try and get us to pay money to the wrong account. We have phishing emails that have malicious attachments, which are trying to convince someone to open that and run and install malware on our systems. That's probably quite a significant threat in terms of ransomware, which is another big thing that organizations face at the moment.
Okay, thank you. So just to put that into a little bit more context, JISC has about 800-900 staff. As you mentioned at the beginning, Laura is actually quite key in trying to get the message out about protecting yourself. Laura, how hard is it for you to actually get a business of our size to understand this level of threat? I mean, I know you're involved in the training and stuff, but it must be a pretty hard task for you.
It's definitely a challenge because people do such different things and they have different levels of understanding about the different threats and what they can do to mitigate against them. But I think it's important to give them that basic understanding when you do the mandatory training, and then to try and expand on that through the year. So as we were talking about phishing, it's a hard topic to cover in an hour's training. You could spend lots of hours trying to explain to people all the different methods, and they're expanding all the time and changing their tactics. So the way a way to sort of help with that is to give a main understanding of what phishing is, what you should be looking out for in your mandatory training, and then try to expand on that with more specific examples in your communications, so separate communications that you send out to colleagues throughout the year. So if we see that we've had one specific type of like phishing email that's coming into quite a few colleagues at the same time, then we will try to do some targeted comms on that to spread the word across the organisation so that they are looking out for this type of email in particular, and hopefully to mitigate against that and stop it from getting through.
Okay. So it sounds incredibly in depth and must be a royal pain in your ass when people do the wrong thing. I'm just actually going to change slightly and go to Elliot for this one, for the next one though. When he first sort of mentioned about it, Alex said that obviously there's the phishing side of things, but there's the probably less recognised, more real life aspect of cybersecurity. Elliot, have you been involved in the sort of on-site trying to gain entry style attacks of cybersecurity? And if you have, can you give us a bit of an example of what that entails?
Yeah, sure. I haven't done a massive amount of it. Just when I joined JISC was obviously in the middle of COVID, so that has made things a bit trickier to do stuff on site. But what we're kind of looking for there is just to get a general overview of what an organization overall it is like with their security. It's incredibly difficult to keep everybody kind of on their toes all the time. And it's one of the great things about being kind of on the red team side is that, we only need to find one weakness, whereas when you're on the other side of it, you have to get everything absolutely right all the time. So being physical is a great way of bypassing a lot of the security controls that people put in place, firewalls, things like that. They don't work when you're on site. What I like to do is basically walk around without any visitor badges on or anything like that. I tend to have a laptop in my hand. I'll wander up to people and I'll say to them, "Hey, I'm here to audit the Wi-Fi. Could I take a look at your laptop, please, just to check to make sure everything's going well with the Wi-Fi?" And most people will just go, "Yeah, sure, just here you go," and they'll hand you over their laptop and you'll be able to tap away at their keyboard and take a look at things. As part of a test, I may be asked to try and, for instance, plug a USB into that laptop. Doesn't do anything, but what it does is it proves that somebody could get access and plug something in that could be doing anything on that device. That could be something like a rubber ducky that runs a series of commands automatically, or it could be laden with malware that can, as soon as it's plugged in, the machine scans it, triggers that malware, and infects the machine. So we don't actually do that because that could be a bit of a pain to try and clean up. But the fact that I could just plug a USB in is enough to show that it could happen. I've also been able to just say to people, "Oh, hi, do you mind if I take this out into the corridor to check the signal strength out there with it?" And they've said, "Yep, crack on." And I've walked out of a room with their laptop without giving them any form of ID or anything like that. So that's the kind of thing we're checking for physically, is just looking for whether people are actually listening to what their organization's security guidance and stuff is. And I'm sure Laura can probably agree with this. It's incredibly hard to keep people focused all the time on being vigilant with what things are going on. So that sometimes that physical can hit home a lot more for people and can help them really focus their efforts on what their awareness training should be about.
So what it sounds like, whether it's a sort of a digital attack through any sort of phishing or spear phishing attempt, or if it's even on site, it's fair to say that everyone is being subjected to some form of social engineering to let their guard down. Is that a fair assessment of it?
Yeah, absolutely. That is ultimately what it comes down to. You're trying to persuade people to do something they wouldn't necessarily want to do, and it may even be something that kind of rings alarm bells for them. So trying to persuade somebody to let you through a door that has an access lock on it or something. But it's about convincing them it's the right thing. And the way you can do that is using a sense of urgency. So I need this done really, really quick. I think both James and Laura mentioned, finance gets hit with, "Oh, here's our updated banking details. You need to change these immediately, otherwise the payment won't go through." And it's the same in person as well as through phishing and things like that. Sense of urgency, sense of authority as well. People don't like saying no to people who they think are kind of more important than them. So again, things like audits, the word audit to a lot of people in business sounds really official and scary, and you can't argue with somebody doing an audit. So you play on those kind of feelings. And that's true both in person and, via emails and things like that. So sense of urgency, sense of authority, and just try and be nice to people as well. So be friendly. People want to help you as well. So saying like, "Oh, I'm really stuck here. I could really do with a hand with this door," or something like that. If you read up on it, you'll hear about people who wear fake plaster casts on their feet and walk in with crutches because people want to help somebody who can't help themselves. So it's playing on all those things that make us human and make us nice people.
I think with the sort of phishing attacks and things like that, people all joke about the Nigerian princes who have tons of gold they need to ship, and you're the one to help them out. So I think it's fair to say that it's evolved a long way since then. Just moving on slightly then. One thing just to try and get people to know the different types of roles that everyone has a bit more. Alex, what would you say is the biggest challenge you actually have in your role as a pen tester?
That's a bit of a tough one, a bit of a difficult one. There's several things that can be challenging in many a role. Pen testing has its ups and downs with certain things. You're never going to be an expert at everything. There are a lot of different attacks or things that you need to figure out as quickly as possible to carry on with the test. As Elliot once said, you need to be a 30-minute expert in anything and everything to be good at the job. So say you're looking at someone's Active Directory setup, you need to know what to look for, where to look for it. And if you don't already know that, you could be coming up with some sort of bespoke camera system and you don't know what those cameras are. So you need to figure out exactly what you're looking for on those cameras, because exploits and issues are always different. So one of them would be learning things quickly and making sure that you know where to look. Is always a great thing in IT. Is if you don't know what something is, you need to know where to look for it, and that's great for all IT really. Something that I personally face that is quite an issue is something called imposter syndrome. It's a bit of a weird one, but it's due to the nature of the job. There are a lot of people that are extremely clever at what they do, and imposter syndrome is basically a feeling that you're never quite where you should be or what you should be doing. Now, given I've been in the job for at least a year now, it does get better over time, but it's always something that you keep thinking of if you're doing a tester. Are you doing the best of your ability? Because at the end of the day, your job as a penetration tester isn't to say, oh, I've broken into your network. The key to it is to tell the customer that where their problems are and how to fix it. So you always have that sort of niggling itch in the back of your head saying, have I found everything? Will the customer be safe? I want to make sure, my job is to make sure they're safe through attacking. So that's something that I face as a challenge personally, but it's quite widespread in cybersecurity just because of how technical the job is. You always feel that someone else is better than you. So it's a bit of a personal one, but yeah, that's my answer.
Just to go a little step further as well, I'm aware of, and you can probably elaborate a little bit more on this one. But there are sort of ethical hacking competitions occasionally, aren't there? Is that something you've ever given a crack at, or something you describe a bit?
Not personally. I've not gone to one personally or attended one, but I have seen them and carried out the tests on. Essentially, the teams gain access to particular what's known as capture the flag boxes. So they're machines that are purposely built in a very, very specific way to have very minimal amounts of ways to get somewhere. So teams basically compete by, all teams have the same machine and they all have to try and essentially get root on the machine or gain admin level access to that machine and find a particular flag or like a text file somewhere on the system that says, well done, you've beaten this machine, you've got into it using the exploits. So whilst I haven't taken part actively in a competition, I have had a look at the boxes that people have taken part in, and it is a fun environment. You can actually catch a lot of VODs online of people participating in those capture the flag events, and then they do look like a good bit of fun.
Fair enough. So there's something for anyone who's looking to get into the sector to actually look forward to on a competitive side, which is quite an interesting thing given the severity of the problems that this can cause. James, just to come to you briefly, if I can, please, as someone who's had a lot of experience with cybersecurity and things change all the time. it's a big thing to look after a company like ours and any others that we're partners with. Are there any sorts of flags that you can sort of spot when people are trying to access our sites and things maliciously, which are easy for you to sort of talk about?
That's a good question. We have a wide range of systems that we use to sort of monitor what's going on within the company. It's difficult to say that there's just one thing that we rely upon. I'd say at the moment, most of the alerts that we investigate are fed to us by some of Microsoft's security tools. So they actually provide us with a really good suite of tools that help us monitor all our laptops, mobile phones, emails, and sort of the office tools that we've got, like SharePoint and Teams and so on. They're able to detect suspicious patterns of activity. So if someone's accessing a system from a location that they've not been to before, or from a country where it's unusual for a member of staff to visit, then that can flag alerts. We can also do things like spot when somebody is trying to access a system not using the laptop that's been issued to them. All sorts of sort of tools like that at our disposal, but we're constantly having to stay ahead of the game to update and change them and install new tools to try and detect and prevent attacks. So you're right, everything is changing so rapidly, but it's extremely difficult to have like a static tool set for defending systems and be able to stay like that. It'd be really nice if one day we could reach that point where we just had one tool that my team could monitor and see all the sort of cyber and security events that are happening on all our systems. But personally, I think that's unlikely to happen at any time in the near future. So yeah, I hope that answers that one.
Thank you. It certainly sounds like a tricky problem, especially as it changes all the time. What I would like to just carry on with this one then is I'm gonna ask James. I'm gonna ask Alex and Elliot this one separately. But if you went back to before you were in cybersecurity and you're looking to break into it, is there any particular route that you would suggest to those people who are interested in the sort of cyber defense side of things, which is good for getting into cyber defense?
Oh, it's a tough one. There's so many routes into this, into cybersecurity and cyber defense and the attacking side of things. That I think the main thing to say to people would be primarily is not to panic about where you are. If you talk to probably everybody in the industry, they've probably all got a different story and a different route into it. My first ever job, I hate to say it on a server like this, but I dropped out of university. My first ever job after that was working on an off license. So, I certainly didn't have kind of the most normal start to this. But, I got into it through an apprenticeship with the government, and that kind of led me through this route. I think to say really is if you're starting out is try to look for stuff that's a bit more generic. I wouldn't say to specialize too early in any one thing, as there's so much within cybersecurity that if you go into it saying you want to become a Android malware reverse engineer, that you're potentially missing out on many other career paths that you may find more interesting than that, and there's always time further down to get that specialism. But I'd say for whatever role you're going in is get your basics down, your core stuff down. So while a lot of things do change, some stuff doesn't. Networking is still networking. It's still using, the OSI model and the 7 layers and all that kind of thing. And having that fundamental understanding will greatly help you in whatever you do, whether that's looking at attacks or trying to attack. Understanding the hows and the whys of those things work will greatly benefit you. Learn in your own time if you don't have a route kind of in terms of doing an apprenticeship or something like that, then learning in your own time can be great to show evidence. Try and get some practical experience. There's lots of platforms out there that allow you to do this stuff in a safe environment and give you some experience of actually using tools and things like that. So get that up. and then try and look for somewhere that either does like a placement, where you can do a year in industry or something like that even, or if you have to, kind of take the long way round, start as a technical analyst, first line support, move your way up and gradually move sideways, because all that experience you build up on the way will help you in your job, even if at the time it doesn't feel relevant. It will benefit you.
Yeah, I can vouch for that one. My personal entry into this job was starting off. I used to be in the forces, and then when I left that, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I was a trained engineer, working with electronics and mechanical things, and then I managed to somehow wing my way into a job doing IT, which I believe in my interview was a case of going, yeah, I know what an IP address is. And they gave me the job because I was better than the other people that applied, apparently. 2 years down the line of that, I was doing third line IT stuff, and I still didn't really know what I wanted to do. I just enjoyed computers. I sort of left doing computers, a technical support role to the software support. Still somewhat working with IT, but it was extremely specialized. And then I basically started working for JISC and realized that my spare time and things that I wanted to do was security. I really enjoyed pen testing, something that I wanted to do. So like Elliot said as well, I jumped onto platforms that will allow me to do stuff in a safe space. Setting up your own home network is a great way to remember things that you may have forgotten. And then using it as a test environment is fantastic as well. And then I decided just to ask the JISC pen testing team and said, I'd love to do what you guys do. I've got some experience. Is there any way that I can do what you guys do? And they gave me the opportunity to do a secondment with their team. So I worked with them it started off at 1 day a week just to see what everyone did, how I would apply the things that I've learned to a real life scenario. Obviously, I've been playing around with safe environments where a machine is set up specifically to have an issue, but facing a real world scenario with a team is a completely different ball game. So after 1 day a week, I realized how much I loved it and started to do 2 days a week. My boss didn't like that too much because I was not doing the work that I was meant to be doing. I was getting too involved in security. And then it got to the point where they wanted me to help with full tests for a whole week. So I'd not do any security stuff during my work time and save up a couple of days that we'd agreed on and do a whole week at a time until I realized that they had a job going, and I managed to do that. In the meantime, I was doing certifications and just home learning is what really got me going, and the opportunity to essentially just find someone or find something that I wanted to do and just go for it. Have no shame. Go and ask people.
No, that makes perfect sense. And I think what both yourself and Elliot have actually done there is highlighted the fact that there are so many different routes into cybersecurity. And this is actually although it sounds very, very sort of auspicious in some ways, and sneaky in others, to be fair, just because you may not go to university doesn't mean that you can't get into this. Just because you come from a certain background or anything like that doesn't mean you can't do it. And it's really encouraging to see that there are so many different routes, whether it is college or university or apprenticeships, which will no doubt help students as well find their end goal. Coming from a slightly different aspect on the sort of entry level point, Laura, you do have, as I said, a very different role because you are all about educating those businesses on an internal sort of facing thing and getting people to understand that. And I know it's not as techy as some of the other roles, but how did you get into that role itself as well, please?
Yeah, sure. So when I finished sixth form, I didn't really have much of an idea of what I wanted to do. And therefore university was a very expensive option. So I decided not to go down that route initially. And I started working for basically an administrative training college, and I was one of the trainers there. And I was helping other other students to basically get into sort of administrative roles. And I realised that through that role, I really enjoyed helping people. And therefore, when cybersecurity started to gain some traction and I started to hear more about it, I thought, oh, maybe this is an interesting topic because I had been interested in technology before this as well. And so I started looking at options for getting into cybersecurity. But but there wasn't as many. I don't think it was very. It wasn't very easy or straightforward, as I'm sure people are still finding now. And it's always interesting to hear the different routes that people have gone through. But for me, I decided to go down the traditional route of going to university. So I studied cybersecurity management at Bournemouth Uni, and it covered quite a wide range of topics. So it wasn't sort of solely based on the technical side. It covered business topics, management topics, and also some technical. And I found there was a psychology topic that was really interesting, and it was all about people and how they work with technology. And my interest from that grew. And during our third year, we had the option to go on to do a placement with a company. And so I started working with a company called CyberSafe, who are based in London, and they focus on the human aspect of cybersecurity and create training for companies. And from there, so that was a fantastic year, really interesting, and I would definitely recommend getting that work experience if you're able to. And from there, I created a training material for my graduation project in my final year. And it really pushed forward to me the fact that this side of the cybersecurity was really interesting. It's all about helping people, so it's something I feel really passionate about. And so when I saw the job at JISC, I thought I would just have a go and see how it went. And I got the job, so I was lucky enough to do that. And so I'm able to do that as part of the role now, which I really enjoy.
Oh, we are very, very happy to have you. So I'm glad that chain of events rolled out. I'm actually going to just turn it around a little bit. James, you are our head of information security, and rather than asking about all of your illustrious career, what I'd like to do instead, then, obviously, a lot of people here are looking at getting into cybersecurity and stuff. If you were going down the recruitment path, and I'm not talking about specific qualifications and stuff because that can get quite niche, but is there anything in particular that you look for in your applicants when you're recruiting, please?
I was just thinking about that as Laura was speaking, because I was remembering, when we had Laura's vacancy and she applied for that job. I think we went into specifics there with Laura as to what we were actually looking for there. We had a wide range of people apply for that post, and we'd set out on the job description all the things we were looking for, and it had the stuff you'd expect, experience of public speaking and being able to put together training materials and courses and run those sorts of things. I think when we got the responses out to that advert, we got quite a large number of responses back, because some of the skills are quite broad, so it could have been a bit much for us to expect to have someone with the perfect range of skills and the right experience and interest in doing the job. So we were getting people who had experience in training in other technical topics, or people who had experience in cybersecurity and maybe had touched a bit on training and awareness. One of the things that I found quite difficult when sifting through all these was to get really a good impression of why these people wanted the role. So had some people who had really extensive CVs and a long list of impressive experience, much more than Laura had, but on their application made very little mention of what it was that we had said we were looking for. So they hadn't really emphasised the experience that they'd had in the training and the security and awareness. People have put down, "Oh, I've done 6 years of being an information security manager, or I've done 3 years as an auditor," and whilst those were useful skills that we could build upon, they didn't really give me much of a picture as to why that person really wanted to work in a role that was predominantly going to be awareness and training. So I think when I'm looking for all these applicants, and the thing that stood out when we hired Laura was that she gave this really good impression of why she actually cared specifically about this role, and the the sort of, I guess, the cliche, but the passion she had for the communications and awareness aspect of it didn't really come across in the majority of the applications that we looked through. So I think for me, it's often a little bit less about the experience and skills they have, because can't expect everyone, particularly when they're starting out in their career, to have a great deal of experience, and we can't always expect people to have exact skills I'm looking for. And often I can just train people in those anyway. So if someone doesn't know how to use a particular tool that we've got, I can send them on a training course or coach them through that. But what I'm looking for is really someone who shows some signs of excitement in their experience and their CV and their application about working in the field, and someone who I know if I give them a task that is slightly outside their experience, that they will tackle it with enthusiasm and be able to manage that. It's quite a hard thing, I think, to get across in a CV or on a job application, but you can sometimes just tell from looking over it that this person is really passionate about security, and this person maybe is a really excellent IT person, but it's not really security that gets them excited in the morning.
Okay, thank you for that. That's actually more helpful than you probably realise. Right, we are literally coming to the very, very end. We're probably going to run over by a minute or two. What I would like to do, just before we go, quickly running through our speakers, could you please give me your 10-second piece of advice to someone who wants to get into cybersecurity now? Starting with Alex, please.
Have a focus on learning. Certificates don't really matter as long as you are keen. It's exactly what James was saying.
Brilliant. Thank you. Elliot, your thoughts?
Don't stress about comparing yourself to other people. Go your own path, and as long as you have a goal in mind, you'll get there, whatever your background of the route you're taking.
I tell you what, that's fantastic advice no matter what. But if you're saying this works for here, then even better. James, I know we've probably just plumbed the depths with that last question, but is there any other 10-second snippet you could suggest to potential applicants to cybersecurity?
Yeah, I'd say don't worry about not being a perfect match for a job description.
Brilliant, thank you. And finally, Laura, is there any words of wisdom you would like to impart for those joining the sector?
I would say to try new things and take on challenges, because you will learn so much from that, not just about yourself but also about the topic.
That's brilliant. I think there's a fairly famous piece of advice from Branson, and I'm paraphrasing massively here, where he says, don't go for a job go for one you don't know and learn on your way. And it kind of applies a little bit to that. Anywho, that's a complete sideline I will not go down. We've reached the end of this actual session now. I would like to thank all 4 of our speakers, Alex, Elliot, Laura and James, for coming along. What I would say, I know there's probably people out there who hopefully have more questions and stuff. When we're moving away from the main stage, you will find that we do have channels on ethical hacking and cyber defense. Please put any and all questions in there and we will do our best to actually address them. Thank you very much, guys, for coming along. Everyone else, we've got a short break now. Coming up at 2 o'clock, we've got Rebecca and Megan from FDM, who are going to be having a brief chat there. Again, please ask questions and stuff. I hope you've enjoyed this, and we will see you shortly. Thanks again, all.